Every Saturday, we take a look at some of the top stories out of the hexagon from the past week. And we start off with the visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping. Paris was the first stop on his first trip to Europe in 5 years, a visit also marking 60 years of diplomatic relations between France and the People's Republic of China. While Xi offered no major concessions on trade imbalances or Ukraine, Macron's office suggested the trip had furthered the leaders' personal relationship, sharing a visit to Macron's childhood vacation spot in the Pyrenees Mountains, where they tasted local ham and cheese.
It's the first stop on Xi Jinping's Europe trip, seeking to rebuild relations at a time of Beijing's tensions with the bloc. The hot topic of the summit, security and the war in Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron and EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen pressed Xi to use China's influence to steer Russia towards de-escalation and an eventual halt to its invasion. This just hours after President Vladimir Putin ordered nuclear weapons drills in response to what he called threats from the West.
We respect the ancient ties that unite China and Russia, as well as the efforts that have been made over decades to stabilize this relationship. In view of this complex history, we welcome China's commitment to refraining from selling any arms or providing any aid to Moscow, and to strictly controlling the export of dual-use goods.
President Xi reaffirmed China's willingness to play a mediator role, saying it hopes the warring sides can resume dialogue.
We call on the parties concerned to resume contact and dialogue in order to gradually build mutual trust. We support the organization of an international peace conference at the right time, one that is recognized by Russia and Ukraine.
Another top priority in the talks, the EU's trade deficit with China, which stood at 291 billion euros last year. Pressuring Xi to accept fair global trade rules, von der Leyen said the bloc would not back down from taking tough measures to protect its economy. Some member countries refused tit-for-tat measures, as China is a key economic partner. Among them are Serbia and Hungary, the two other countries President Xi is due to visit after France.
This week, France marked its National Day for the Abolition of Slavery. Commemorations are held each year on May 10th, the day French Parliament adopted the so-called Taubira Law in 2001, formally recognizing slavery and the slave trade as crimes against humanity. As Shirley Sitbone reports, for the first time this year, the national ceremony was held in one of the French ports used in the transatlantic slave trade.
This year's commemoration of slavery was moved out of Paris to a symbolic location, La Rochelle, one of the port cities used in the slave trade. This is where ships began their expeditions to Africa first and then to America.
For 2 centuries, right here in La Rochelle, ships left this port 447 times, sealing the fate of at least 160,000 women and men who were taken from Africa. 160,000 people out of millions of people who were the victims of slavery and the slave trade.
In the past, France often hailed in its commemorations white activists and political figures who had opposed slavery. Now, the focus is on slaves who resisted the crimes against humanity carried out against them. One type of resistance was called marronnage.
One type of marronnage lasted only a few hours. A slave would escape temporarily and would sometimes meet with other slaves. That's called little marronnage. The other type is longer and better organized. Slaves would escape and try to live autonomously with other slaves.
In metropolitan France, several slaves argued in courts that they could not be held captive because slavery was only legal in the colonies. Clarisse, portrayed in this statue, inaugurated on Friday, is one of the slaves who won their case and gained freedom.
Now, you could say the Paris Olympic Games are now officially underway after the flame arrived on French soil this week in the southern port city of Marseille. In an Olympic first, the flame sailed in on a historic 19th century ship, the Belém, after a 12-day journey from Greece. It was greeted in great pomp by huge crowds. Monty Francis tells us more.
The French rapper Jul lights the Olympic cauldron before a cheering crowd of thousands. With the torch in hand, a historic moment on Marseille's Old Port, highlighted by plumes of red, white, and blue smoke. The most listened to rapper in France was born in Marseille, and his presence at the ceremony was a well-guarded secret. Moments before, another icon, Florent Manodou, the Olympic French swimming champion, handed the torch off to para-Olympic athlete Nantanin Kieta, a gold medalist in the 2016 Games. They made their way down a floating platform, while above, the French Air Force drew the Olympic rings in the sky. Minutes before, as the Belém arrived in Marseille's Old Port, Florent Manodou took the torch in hand and held it up for the crowd to see, overcome with emotion.
They called me a few weeks ago to give me the news. I had tears in my eyes.
There to greet the flame, some 150,000 spectators gathered at the Old Port. Hundreds of others on the beaches of Marseille and in the parks along the shore, hoping to catch a glimpse.
I'm so excited to see it and to be part of this big event.
The majestic Belém spent much of the day along the coast, escorted by about 1,000 sailboats and motorboats, there to welcome the ship to French shores. Among the throngs of people, some 6,000 police officers securing the Old Port for the ceremony. A test for Paris, with France on its highest state of alert ahead of the 2024 Games.
Well, for more on the Olympic torch relay, I'm joined by Genevieve Mansfield, Jen, of the local France, who's been following Olympic proceedings. Thank you so much for being here. Now, despite concerns about traffic and soaring prices and other various headaches caused by the Games, do you think that now that the torch is finally here, excitement is building a little bit?
I think so. I think there's been some apprehension in the buildup, but now that the torch is finally on French soil, I think people are getting excited about it.
Security-wise, the ceremony went off, pretty smoothly, but there was a minor controversy about the local rapper Jules being the surprise torchbearer who lit the cauldron. I didn't entirely follow this. Tell us about it.
Well, it's a small controversy. Basically, the head of the PACA region, that's the Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur region in southern France, he said that Jules wasn't the best choice for the person to light the cauldron, and he felt that someone else would have been better suited. I think some of the subtext of that was that Jules does not perhaps represent the idea of French identity that he had in mind.
And in what way? Can you talk more about Jules?
Well, Jules is a rapper. He's kind of known for making controversial statements and commentary in his rap. And some French people, especially more traditional-minded French people, maybe don't see him as emblematic of French culture or emblematic of traditional French music.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that this isn't the first time there's been a controversy like this. There's also been, controversy over the potential for singer Aya Nakamura to sing at the opening ceremony. That controversy had a lot of racist undertones. Do you feel like the Games are kind of bringing up a lot of questions about kind of underlying tensions surrounding French identity?
Yeah, absolutely. It's showing a lot of cleavages of what is considered French, who is considered French, what is considered to be French music, French cuisine, French culture, and absolutely, like you mentioned with Aya Nakamura, she's a Malian French singer, and a lot of that backlash was, claiming that her music isn't even in French. She does sing in French, but it is definitely a racial backlash as part of that.
Yeah. I saw some people also kind of saying, he's not an athlete. It should be athletes carrying the torch. But there are a whopping 10,000 people taking part in the torch relay. Not all of them are athletes, and they represent really the diversity of French society. You guys have been covering a lot of them, I know, at the local. Tell us about some of the people carrying the torch.
Well, like you mentioned, there's thousands of people that are going to carry the torch. So it's starting off in Marseille, and then it's going to go through small towns. It's going to go through big villages and big cities. It's actually going to leave France and mainland France. It's going to go to the overseas territories in Guadeloupe and Martinique. It's going to come back. It's going to pass through the D-Day beaches, Mont Saint-Michel. And along the way, we've got young people, we've got older people. There's 2 people at least that are over 100 years old. One of them is a former resistance fighter, a member of the French resistance from World War II. And it's interesting. She actually was almost deported to a concentration camp, and she managed to escape. And she's still been an active activist all these years, and she's going to carry the torch in Saint-Étienne.
Wow, it's going to be incredible to follow and see all these people. I know a drag queen is carrying the torch here in Paris. There's going to be a street cleaner as well. Finally, Jen, moving on from the Olympic Games, the end of this week has seen Paris taken over by Swifties, you could say, because American superstar Taylor Swift has been kicking off the European leg of her Eras Tour here in Paris. This has been getting a lot of attention in the French media. How have you guys been covering it at the local?
Well, I'm not sure how many readers of The Local are Swifties, but we have been just covering a lot of the American interest in Taylor Swift on her European tour. I read a figure from Bloomberg that said that we're having 5 times the number of Americans visiting France for the Taylor Swift concerts than for the Olympic Games. So there's a lot of Americans that are actually, they've decided that it's more affordable or perhaps equally priced to come see Taylor Swift in Paris than it is to see her in the U.S. So you've got a lot of Americans that are coming over. In terms of French people that are interested in Taylor Swift, I think it's kind of a new phenomenon here. You know, country music wasn't ever a big genre, but yeah, she's definitely taking France by storm.
Yeah, and do you think that her music, I mean, as an American, I think this is one of those moments where, you know, your worlds collide because it's American singer here in France. Do you feel like her music is universal and kind of appeals to a French audience?
Oh, I'm sure. I think that a lot of Taylor Swift's music is about experiences that everyone has, you know, love, loss, breakups, you know, being a teenage girl. So I'm sure there's plenty of French people that can relate to her, yeah.
You didn't get tickets, though?
No, I didn't. You know, even though they're more affordable here than in the U.S., I still couldn't bring myself to pay for it.
Yeah, I have to say, me neither. I'm a kind of a low-level Swiftie.
Yeah, same.
I do appreciate the music, but not ready to go get a ticket. All right, Jen, thank you again so much for being here today. Again, that's Genevieve Mansfield from The Local France, and that's it for A Week in France. But thanks so much for watching, and stay with us if you can. We have news coming up just after this.